Good afternoon, I'm Dilip, editor of EducationWorld.
Good afternoon, I'm Summiya, Yasmeen, managing editor.
In the post-COVID era, private schools have been under a lot of stress because state governments have been issuing spate of circulars advising schools not to collect fees or to waive fees, or also to impose some curbs on online learning.
And all these matters have gone to the court, and various high courts have ruled, some in favor of, mostly in favor of private schools.
No, and the most important of all, that while they've told them not to charge fees, they've told them to continue paying teachers and staff and not to lay off anybody. So that's become like a very difficult and impossible situation, especially for private budget schools, which are low-cost schools. And in India, I don't know how many of you are aware, Indian budget private schools charge fees, 70% of them charge fees of less than 1,000 rupees a month.
Yes.
And they are obliged under law to pay 7th pay commission salaries, but charge such low fees. So they've been put in an impossible situation. And according to the National Independent Schools Alliance, some 58% of the 400,000 budget schools, that's more than half, are likely to close down if this lockdown continues for another 3 months.
Yes, and this is a very dangerous development because it's not a very well-known fact that out of India's 256 million school-going children, 50% of them are in private schools. So we are talking about the entire almost 150 million children. Future is at stake.
And if you add the private preschools, it will go to more than 50%. It will be like the majority are going to private schools.
Yes.
So contrary to what our comrades, left-wing comrades, their fellow travelers say, private schools are not elite schools. The entire middle class patronizes private schools. And even the aspirational middle class, working people, lower middle class, they send their children to private budget schools. And they are being endlessly harassed by these rules, regulations, notifications, fee regulations, and advisories to keep paying their teachers huge salaries, etc. So we believe that there is a systematic effort being made to level down private schools to the level of government schools, from which there is a mass and continuous exodus into private budget schools. Therefore, in our cover story this month, we've taken this issue head on, and we've written the story called Neta Babu Brotherhood, Destroying Private Education.
Yes, I think you must read this cover story and for yourself evaluate the slow destruction of the private school education system which is happening in this country and raise your voice against it.
Yeah, and it's important to understand that when you destroy the private education system, you destroy the entire education system.
Yes.
It's not as though that if the private schools are destroyed, you have the option of government schools. Because as I said earlier, people are voluntarily, even very poor people are voluntarily fleeing government schools because of very poor learning outcomes, not teaching English, teacher absenteeism, crumbling infrastructure, very poor budgets given to government schools by central and state governments.
Yes, and also in the cover story we've done a brilliant compilation of what's happening in each state in terms of what High Court ruling, what's the fees regulation, what's the status on online education. You'll find this compilation very, very informative.
Yes, and that's the irony of it. Now school leaders and principals and especially promoters are spending more time in courtrooms than in classrooms.
Yes.
All right-thinking people, educators, parents should read it very carefully, and especially to parents who sometimes are on the side of government.
Yeah, in fact, in a lot of state governments, parents are the ones who are petitioning state governments to regulate fees, waive fees
of private schools.
Yes.
So therefore, it's very important for parents to understand that schools that have been built, some of them 150 years old, are very valuable institutions, and you should nurture and cherish them and cooperate with their managements instead of filing court cases inviting government intervention. Government intervention is always a two-edged sword. And coincidentally, just yesterday, the Central Square Foundation in Delhi has published a 200-page report, first time ever, called State of Private Schools in India, 2020.
Yes.
I suggest you have a look at that report also, and which could be read as like in conjunction with our cover story.
And also, before we sign up, in ParentsWorld we've done a very interesting and informative cover story on how parents can cope with the online learning revolution. For the first time perhaps in a century, the school has pervaded the living room. And most parents are struggling and grappling with this virtual intrusion. So in our ParentsWorld cover story, we've interviewed a galaxy of educators and parenting experts who have offered some very good advice on parents how they can cope with this online learning
Revolution.
Yes.
Well, that's all for today. Thank you.
Thank you.